Imagine this. You wake up in a house you don't remember entering. The furniture is familiar but not yours. The books on the shelf are titles you've never read. The photos on the walls show a smiling face that looks like yours, but something in the eyes is absent. You search the drawers, clothes your size, a toothbrush already used, a calendar filled with meetings and goals you don't recall setting, and then it hits you. You've been living someone else's life. Worse, it's your own. How many mornings have you opened your eyes and stepped into the script without questioning the author? How many smiles have you faked, goals pursued, jobs accepted, partners loved, not because you chose them, but because they were expected of you? You didn't notice it happening. No alarms, no smoke, just a slow, gentle erosion of self, a life crafted through compromises and quiet nods. You said yes to safety, you said no to uncertainty. Over time, the cost of fitting in became the loss of something irreplaceable. You. There is a peculiar pain, one rarely spoken aloud, that comes not from failure, but from success in the wrong direction, from climbing the wrong mountain expertly, from building a beautiful cage and calling it home. People tell you to find yourself, but what if you were never taught how? What if, like most, you were conditioned to become what others found acceptable, never who you truly are? So you mold, you shrink, you blend, you mirror, you master the subtle art of disappearing in plain sight. The paradox? You can appear entirely functional, even impressive, while being profoundly lost. No one sees it. Not your boss, not your friends, not your family. You become a reflection of what everyone wants, and in doing so, vanish beneath their desires. Now ask yourself, have you ever truly met the real you? Not the version built from praise and punishment, not the echoes of you, parents, the expectations of teachers, the trends of your time, but the raw, unfiltered essence beneath it all. When was the last time you sat in silence and asked, what do I believe? What do I want? Who am I when no one's watching? There is a quiet agony in living a life that never feels like yours, and yet billions are doing exactly that, not out of malice, not out of laziness, but because they were taught that survival matters more than truth. And so we become experts in adaptation. We trade identity for acceptance. We choose fitting in over standing out. We numb discomfort with distraction, silence rebellion with routine. We tell ourselves, one day I'll figure it out. But time doesn't pause, and someday becomes never. Is it any wonder that so many people feel like ghosts in their own lives, drifting, performing, achieving, yet always asking in quiet moments, why does none of this feel real? You've been fed 1,000 lies about success, happiness, and identity. You were taught to seek approval before authenticity, to build resumes before self-awareness, to achieve more instead of becoming more. And so the real question isn't, what should I do with my life? It's something far more terrifying. What if the life I've built was never mine to begin with? This is the great tragedy of our time. We mistake performance for purpose. We confuse identity with image. We pursue validation, not understanding. But here's the whisper beneath the chaos, the one you've heard in your quietest hours, when the noise of the world fades. There is something in me I haven't yet found. That voice, that ache, that subtle unrest you feel in your bones when you're alone with yourself. It's not weakness, it's your soul trying to speak before it forgets how. And perhaps, just perhaps, your real life hasn't even started yet. Because life doesn't begin when you graduate, or get married, or land the job, or collect the accolades. Life begins when you find yourselves, not the mask, not the role, not the title, but the you beneath it all. And to do that, you have to understand what took you away from yourself in the first place. Let's go there next. From the moment you took your first breath, the world began shaping you. Before you could speak, you were being watched, measured, labeled. Good baby, difficult child, so smart, too emotional. Words you didn't choose began defining who you were, and like soft clay under pressure, your soul began to mold itself, not toward truth, but toward approval. Carl Jung warned us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but he also knew how rare that privilege truly is. Because from your earliest days, you were taught a lie so subtle and pervasive that it became invisible. You must become what the world wants in order to be loved. This is the origin of the false self, the mask you built to survive. Psychologically, this is called adaptation. Philosophically, it is existential betrayal. Spiritually, it is the beginning of forgetting. As a child, you didn't learn to be yourself. You learned to read the room. You learned when to smile and when to stay quiet, when to cry and when to pretend you were fine. You studied the micro-expressions of your parents, teachers, friends. Every sigh, every scolding, every subtle withdrawal of love became data. And you, the eager student of survival, learned quickly. Being me is dangerous. Being what they want is safe. So you edited yourself, bit by bit, innocently, desperately. This process is almost universal and nearly invisible. By the time you're a teenager, you've already constructed a persona. Maybe you're the achiever, the rebel, the caretaker, the clown, the perfectionist. But make no mistake, these are roles, not reflections, performances, not presence. And the longer you wear the mask, the more you forget there was a face beneath it. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." Why? Because it's only in solitude that the performance begins to crack. Only in silence that the echoes of your truth can be heard again. But we are not taught to seek solitude. We are taught to fear it. We are taught to be constantly surrounded by noise, by entertainment, by productivity, by other people's opinions. The moment silence descends, we reach for our phones. The moment boredom whispers, we scroll. The moment pain surfaces, we run. Why? Because if we were to truly stop and listen, we might hear the voice we've ignored for decades, the voice of the self we abandoned. And that voice is not always polite. Jean-Paul Sartre called this confrontation nausea, the gut-wrenching realization that everything you believed was solid is in fact arbitrary, that your identity, your choices, even your values may have been inherited, not chosen. He wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what if you never made yourself at all? What if others did, and you've simply worn the costume? Herein lies the hidden tragedy. You were born as an original, but forced to become a copy. The education system didn't ask who you were, it told you what you needed to be. Society didn't encourage self-discovery, it demanded conformity. Even love in many cases was conditional. Be good, be successful, be agreeable, and then you'll be worthy. But worthiness based on performance is not love. It is a transaction, and transactions never nourish the soul. Nietzsche saw this with piercing clarity. He despised the herd morality, the unconscious following of social norms that suppress individuality and greatness. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe, he wrote. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The tragedy: most people never even try, because they don't know they're lost. They've confused identity with familiarity. They believe comfort means truth. They mistake what I've always done for who I truly am. But there is nothing more dangerous than comfort without self-awareness. This hidden problem, the quiet loss of self, lies beneath so much modern suffering: anxiety, depression, addiction, burnout. Not always because something is wrong with the brain, but because something is missing from the soul. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." This is not a critique, it's a diagnosis. We're drowning in distractions because we're starving for self. We chase success, sex, status, stimulation, because we've lost the map back to our own hearts. And without that map, life becomes a maze. You run faster and faster, hoping speed will compensate for direction. You achieve more and more, hoping that maybe eventually something will feel right. You become addicted, not just to substances or screens, but to avoiding yourself. But nothing will ever feel right until you return to what's real. And so here we are, in a world of curated identities and algorithmic validation. A world where people craft their image with more care than their inner life. A world where authenticity has become a marketing tool, where silence is unbearable, and being real is revolutionary. You've been told to be successful. You've been told to be happy. You've been told to be good. But who told you to be yourself? And more importantly, what does that even mean anymore? To find yourself, you must first realize how thoroughly you've been trained to forget. And that realization is terrifying, because once you see it, you can never go back. You will notice the masks in yourself, in others, in society. You'll see how much of the world is theater, how much of your life has been scripted, and how long you've lived as a character instead of the author. But with this pain comes possibility, a sliver of light, the beginning of revolt. The recognition of your loss is the first step toward your return. Because once you realize who you are not, you begin the sacred, terrifying journey of discovering who you might be. And that is where the true consequences begin to emerge. The tragedy of forgetting yourself doesn't scream. It doesn't knock down your door or announce its arrival. It creeps in like fog, silent, weightless, but all-consuming. And because it arrives so quietly, you assume it's normal. You chalk it up to just growing up. You call it responsibility, realism, maturity. But what if the world calls it growing up, and your soul calls it giving up? The consequences of this invisible loss stretch far beyond confusion or identity crisis. They shape how you love, how you suffer, how you live, and how you die. Because when you don't know who you are, you hand your life over to anyone who sounds confident. You become susceptible to suggestion, to manipulation, to every cultural narrative that offers a ready-made answer to the question, who should I be? Advertisers tell you, politicians tell you, spiritual gurus tell you, lifestyle influencers tell you, buy this, vote for that, believe in this, become this version of you and all will be well. And the most dangerous part, it works. For a while. You feel good when you upgrade your wardrobe. You feel empowered when you say the right things. You feel like you're finally becoming someone. But deep down, there's a static you can't quite tune out, a vague, gnawing discomfort, a sense that you're performing again, except now you're just better at it. This is how false identity becomes reinforced, not through oppression, but through reward. We are given trophies for being who we are not. We are applauded for fitting molds, for optimizing ourselves into robo-tick predictability. And when our real self begins to resist, we call it a mental health crisis. But is it? Or is it an inner revolution? Carl Jung called this resistance the return of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we rejected, denied, or buried in our quest to become acceptable. Every time you silenced your truth to fit in, every time you betrayed your gut to please others, every time you said yes when your soul whispered no, you fed the shadow. And eventually, it grows strong enough to fight back. It shows up as rage you can't explain, as sadness that won't leave, as dreams that haunt and confuse, as a quiet, relentless voice saying, "This isn't me." But instead of listening, we try to suppress it. We diagnose it, medicate it, scroll it away, drink it down, work it off, sex it numb. We do anything, except face the truth. The pain isn't the problem, it's the signal. The body breaks down, the mind fractures, the heart closes, all because we are trying to sustain a life that doesn't fit the shape of our soul. We were told to adapt. No one taught us how to return. And so we build lives that are structurally sound and spiritually vacant. Nice jobs, nice homes, nice smiles, but inside, exile. And what's more devastating is this: you can't love deeply when you're not rooted in who you are. You may love people, yes, but part of you always holds back, because love requires vulnerability, and how can you be vulnerable when you're not even sure what you're protecting? When you don't know who you are, intimacy feels like exposure, connection feels like risk. You fear that if someone sees you clearly, they'll realize you don't know who you are either. So relationships become rehearsals. Friendships become performances, and even solitude becomes unbearable, because being alone with a stranger is unnerving, even if that stranger is you. And now we arrive at the collective cost. Because it's not just individual lives that fracture when the self is lost. Society fractures too. A culture full of people who don't know themselves becomes a culture of conformity, addiction, and quiet desperation. People without a core are easy to control, easy to market to, easy to provoke. They cling to ideologies like lifeboats. They seek community in outrage. They adopt identities like costumes, then rage at anyone who questions the script. Why? Because if you take away the label, the tribe, the ideology, there's nothing left, and nothingness terrifies us. Sartre said, "Man is condemned to be free." That freedom, to choose who you are, is both a blessing and a burden, and when we run from that burden, we run into the arms of false identities that promise safety but steal our soul. This is why people feel exhausted without understanding why depression rates rise even as material comfort increases, why people long for something but can't name it. Because the something is the self, not a perfect self, not a polished self, but a real one. And realness costs. It costs comfort. It costs certainty. It costs the approval of people who only ever knew the version of you that was easy to love. But not finding yourself costs more. It costs your life, not in the dramatic sense, but in the slow erosion of presence, the gradual death of meaning, the endless ache that says, there has to be more, and there is. But only if you're willing to rebel. Because the next step is not self-help. It's self-liberation, a choice to rip off the costume, to burn the script, to risk being seen, not as someone polished, but as someone becoming. And that changes everything. Rebellion doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's the quiet act of saying no. No to the version of you that exists only to please. No to the Rasham Sar Gars, routines that numb rather than nourish. No to the voices that told you who to be, what to want, how to live. And in that refusal, in that trembling, uncertain no, you begin to reclaim your life. Because every act of finding yourself is an act of defiance. You were trained to perform, but now you begin the dangerous work of undoing, unlearning, unmasking. This is not a makeover, it's a demolition. And like any demolition, it's messy. It begins with admitting what no one wants to say out loud. I don't really know who I am. That truth will terrify your ego. It will feel like groundlessness, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you never had a parachute. But that feeling isn't death, it's birth, because only when the false self cracks can the true self begin to speak. And what does that self say? At first, nothing. It's been silent for so long, it speaks in fragments, images, gut feelings, faint desires you almost forgot existed. Go there, say that, not this. Yes to that. You begin to follow not certainty, but curiosity. And that curiosity becomes your compass. Not confidence, not clarity, just a subtle pull toward what feels a little more alive. It might mean journaling for the first time without an audience, sitting in silence, quitting the thing that makes you sick, taking the walk you've been postponing, asking the question you've been afraid to hear the answer to. This rebellion is internal, but its ripple is immense. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You disappoint others to stay honest with yourself. You allow awkwardness to replace artificial harmony. You stop curating your image and start cultivating your depth. People will notice, some will feel threatened, others will quietly envy your courage. And you? You'll begin to feel something strange and unfamiliar. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of rightness. Like nang barefoot in your own skin. The process will not be linear. There will be regressions. There will be days you beg for the mask again, because the mask was warm, predictable, comfortable. But you'll keep going, because even the discomfort of authenticity feels better than the hollowness of pretending. Along the way, you'll encounter ideas that ignite your transformation. Nietzsche's call to become the Übermensch, the one who creates their own values. Jung's path of individuation, the journey of integrating your shadow to become whole. Sartre's challenge to embrace radical freedom and take ownership of your existence. These aren't just theories, they are torches, held by those who walked through the same darkness and lived to illuminate the way. You'll also find your rebellion mirrored in others. In the artist who paints with trembling hands, in the teacher who dares to speak truth in a room full of masks. In the addict who chooses one more day of sobriety, in the father who breaks the cycle of silence, in the woman who leaves, not because she hates, but because she finally loves herself. These are acts of rebellion, disguised as ordinary courage. But what makes this rebellion so radical is that it's not rooted in rage. It's rooted in honesty. It doesn't scream, it whispers, "This is who I really am," and refuses to apologize for it. And in that refusal, the world begins to rearrange itself. You notice new people entering your orbit, people who speak in truth, not scripts, who laugh without pretense, who cry without shame, who listen without waiting to respond. These people don't need you to be perfect, they just need you to be real. And for the first time, that feels possible. Because you're no longer clinging to who you should be. You're becoming who you were always meant to be, before the world told you otherwise. You begin to create not for applause, but for expression. You begin to love not to be completed, but to be mirrored. You begin to live not for legacy, but for presence. Even, your pain transforms. It becomes a teacher, a compass, a reminder that you're alive and becoming. You understand now that freedom was never about escape. It was about return. Return to what feels real, to the child who once dreamed without asking for permission, to the strange, stubborn parts of you that never fit in, but never went away, to the silence beneath the noise and the voice that whispers, "Welcome back." This is how it begins, not with a plan, but with a permission, to question, to wander, to not know, to break the cycle, to tell the truth, to be awkward, to be free, to say with trembling voice, "I am willing to meet myself." And the moment you say that, the real you starts moving, not toward perfection, but toward presence. And when that happens, everything changes, because the world may still be chaotic, but your center is no longer missing. The path is still uncertain, but your compass is no longer broken. You are no longer acting, you are becoming, and as the false layers fall away, you begin to see what's always been waiting beneath the mask. Not a product, not a brand, not a role, but a soul, whole, messy, brilliant, and yours. And this is the quiet revolution that changes lives, not by force, but by truth. Because the real rebellion is being yourself in a world that profits from your confusion. And now, you're ready for the final truth. At the end of every journey lies a truth you weren't expecting. You thought you were searching for your identity. You thought you were looking for clarity, for direction, for some solid ground to stand on. You believed because the world told you that there was a version of yourself out there, waiting like a buried treasure to be found and claimed forever. But here is the ultimate, most powerful realization. You were never meant to find yourself. You were meant to create yourself. And in this, at one revelation, everything changes. Because finding implies that the self is something fixed, something static, predefined, hidden but complete. But you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are not a statue waiting to be unveiled. You are a river, a flame, a dance between chaos and meaning. You are not a thing, you are a becoming. And this becoming is not linear, it is not clean, it is not always beautiful. It is wild, unpredictable, it defies categories and shatters neat narratives. One day you are confident, the next you're undone. One season you believe in God, the next you believe in nothing but the soil. One moment you love yourself, the next you feel unworthy again. But this isn't failure. This is the nature of a living, breathing soul. It evolves. And the world will still try to freeze you in place. It will hand you identities like cages. It will ask you to brand yourself, to be consistent, to be digestible, to be one thing forever. But you were never meant to be one thing. You are multitudes. You are the child and the warrior, the sinner and the healer, the fool and the sage, the lover and the skeptic, the shattered and the sovereign. And the more you allow those paradoxes to coexist, the more fully alive you become. This is the final freedom. Not the freedom to be someone, but the freedom to be everything you are, even the parts that don't make sense to anyone else. Nietzsche understood this when he said, "You must become who you are, not find, not imitate, become." And becoming requires fire. It means shedding, letting go, burning down the version of you that was built only to survive. And in the ashes, you don't find your true self like a pristine statue. You begin to mold clay with your own hands, not the hands of your parents, not the hands of culture, not the hands of ideology, your hands. And what do you shape? Not perfection, not certainty, but integrity. The real you is not someone without flaws. The real you is someone who knows what those flaws are, and no longer hides from them. You've met your shadow now. You've seen the anger, the grief, the need for control. You've held the part of you that screams for love even when you pretend you're fine. And instead of burying it again, you sit beside it like an old friend. Because you've realized there's no healing without wholeness. The parts you once hated, they're not mistakes. They're messages. The shame you carried, it wasn't yours to begin with. The anxiety, a smoke signal from the self you abandoned. The addiction, a misguided attempt to feel something real. Now finally, you see it. The things you thought were broken in you were just the parts of you that were exiled too soon. And your job is not to fix them. Your job is to welcome them home. This is the return, not to who you were told to be, but to who you've always been beneath the noise. And from that place, life begins to open up again. Not because the world changes, but because your eyes do. You see beauty again, not as an aesthetic, but as a recognition. You see people, not as roles or threats, but as fellow wanderers. You see yourself, not as a product, but as a story still being written. And with each breath, you write a new line. Not for the world's approval, not for the illusion of control, but because it's the most honest thing you can do. To live like this is to live awake, raw, vulnerable, lit from within by something no algorithm can replicate: presence. You are no longer running, no longer pretending, no longer negotiating with your truth. You are here, and that is the beginning of everything. Because life doesn't begin when you check all the boxes, or get the degree, or fall in love, or reach enlightenment, or perfect your morning routine. Life begins when you find yourself, and then choose to become something deeper, something messier, something more honest, something fully alive. So now the question is not, who am I supposed to be? The question is, what do I choose to become, now that I know I am free? Let that question echo. Let it guide your next step, your next word, your next creation. You are not late, you are not broken, you are not lost. You are simply at the edge of something real, and all it takes is one brave moment to say, I'm ready to begin.